They said I was too ambitious, like it was a flaw. I built systems they didn't understand, signed contracts they couldn't dream of, and worked late while they toasted to mediocrity. But the night my daughter whispered, "Why do you only live at work, Daddy?" I broke. I gave 12 years, and in return, I got silence, exclusion, and a quiet burial of everything I created. When I left, I didn't slam the door. I let it close quietly. 2 weeks later, every major partner withdrew. And now, my former boss, he calls every night. I don't answer. He taught me ambition was dangerous. He was right, but not for me. The office lights hummed softly as I leaned back in my chair, staring at the digital mock-up glowing on my screen. 3 months of non-stop work, countless iterations, late-night coffee-fueled code marathons, and it was finally there. A self-optimizing AI strategy suite, not just a product, a revolution. I hit save. Before I could exhale, my phone vibrated. A text from Lily. "We need to talk. It's important." My stomach tightened. Those 4 words never meant anything casual. I called her immediately. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, but not in fear. "I'm pregnant. It's a boy." I smiled so hard it hurt. "Lily, that's amazing." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Purpose beyond ambition. I thought, this is it. This is the moment where everything shifts. 2 days later, my CEO, Daniel Whitmore, called me into his office. It wasn't the first time, but the timing was curious. Daniel was a sharp man, always calculated, never sentimental. "I've reviewed your latest proposal," he said, standing by the window, back to me. "This could be a cornerstone for our future positioning." I nodded. "That's the goal." He turned. "I'm putting you in charge. Full autonomy. But Ethan—" He paused, eyes narrow, lips pulled into something too restrained to be called a smile. "Don't outrun your team. Ambition can alienate." I forced a nod, heart thumping. Gratitude, yes, but beneath it, a flicker of unease. Something in his tone felt less like trust, more like warning. You ever been handed an opportunity so big, it scared you more than it thrilled you? I walked back to my desk with the project file in hand. The room buzzed around me, colleagues chatting about weekend plans, stock options, the usual. I opened my laptop and got back to work, head down, jaw tight. Weeks passed. The framework took form. Meetings stacked up. My name echoed in investor calls, press drafts, and internal briefings. But then, slowly, subtly, things began to shift. I wasn't invited to the next product roadmap session. "Must have been an oversight," the admin said. Then my calendar started populating with irrelevant briefings, operational reviews, not strategy. The real meetings were happening without me. One Thursday afternoon, I ran into my old mentor, Greg Dawson, in the parking lot. He'd retired 6 months ago, but something in his eyes told me he hadn't let go of the company completely. "You still building that AI brain of yours?" he asked, half joking. "Trying to." I smiled, then frowned. "Feels like the walls are moving without me." Greg leaned in. "Daniel's a chess player. You're a knight who's crossed into the queen's space. Just be careful you don't get removed for being too effective." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I opened the latest version of the product deck for review. I froze. The title slide had changed. Vision OS, presented by Marcus Lyle. Marcus? He was a junior consultant, a bright kid, but nowhere near equipped to lead. I flipped through the slides. My architecture, my language, still there. My name, gone. Except for one detail. In the appendix, deep in the code samples, a tiny line still read, ETH RDS V2, my internal watermark. I closed the file and sat there, staring. Not angry, not yet, just numb. That night I came home early, unusual for me. Lily was surprised, then worried. I told her everything. She listened, then took my hand. Whatever happens, we're okay. But Ethan, you need to decide if this job is worth dimming who you are. Later, I read bedtime stories to my daughter. She curled against my chest, whispering, "Why don't you stay home more?" Her voice was soft, innocent, a blade in my heart. After she fell asleep, I stared at her face, then glanced at the mirror. I saw a man drained, conflicted, a father chasing legacy at the cost of presence. I smiled, weakly. Monday, I received a confidential internal memo by mistake, probably sent to the wrong Ethan. My name was listed in a risk register, high visibility asset, potential divergence from executive direction. I read it 3 times. Risk. I was a risk. I closed the email and leaned back. So they weren't just pushing me aside. They were preemptively burying me. Monday morning started like any other, but the second I logged in, the system spat me out. Access restricted. Maintenance in progress. I tried again. Same message. Then I tried my admin override code. Rejected. I emailed IT. They replied 2 hours later with a sterile sentence. Your permissions have been temporarily limited during internal restructuring. Please contact your supervisor for details. I did. Daniel wasn't in the office. I sat in a conference room by myself, staring at the frozen login screen. No call, no explanation, no meeting. Just silence, like I'd been unplugged. By the end of the day, I knew. This wasn't an accident. The next day, I saw a kid, barely 24, wearing a too-tight suit and a name badge that read, Caleb Whitmore. He was in my chair, leading a briefing I wasn't invited to. I asked around. He's the CEO's nephew, someone whispered. Fast-tracked. I walked into the break room, poured myself a coffee, and stared out the window. Below, people moved like nothing had changed. But for me, something had cracked. And it wasn't going to be fixed with a meeting. Later that week, HR requested I review a press statement draft. We need you to verify some language, they said. The memo framed the company's new product as a collaborative innovation from our youngest, most promising minds. My name wasn't there, but my work was. And worse, buried in the language were claims about compliance benchmarks we hadn't met. Bold, clear, and entirely false. I flagged them. The reply came back instantly. Legal says it's acceptable framing. Please approve. No. I went to Daniel. He stood at the glass wall, watching the street below. This isn't about you, Ethan, he said without turning around. This is about positioning, perception. You're asking me to lie. He turned, sharp. I'm asking you to be a team player. I walked out without responding. My hands shook, not with fear, but rage. Controlled, focused. If your boss asked you to lie to protect the company, would you? That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room, my thoughts sprinting past every milestone I had built in this company. Every system, every late night, every sacrifice birthday. All leading to this, a slow erasure. The next morning, I accessed the public drive, hoping to pull backup versions of my project files. But one folder caught my eye, buried in a directory called Legacy Transfers. I clicked, Inside was a zipped folder labeled Vision OS Export PKG. I opened it. There it was, my code, my architecture, prepped, packaged, and ready for external shipment. Destination? A consulting firm I'd never heard of, one that, on further digging, had ties to Daniel's private investment firm. They weren't just erasing me, they were selling me. I closed the file and sat there in silence, my breath shallow, my mind sharp. This was war. The following Monday, I refused to sign off on the press document. By Tuesday, I was summoned by HR. You're being reassigned temporarily to assist with IT transition efforts. It was a basement office, no windows, one flickering light. I had no team, just a broken printer and an expired whiteboard marker. I called Lily that night, told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "You're fighting a company, Ethan. They don't bleed like people do." "I know," I said, "but I can bleed, and I have." "Then promise me you'll stop bleeding. Be smarter than them." That night, I backed up everything. Emails, messages, system logs. Not for revenge, for protection. I encrypted them, stored them offline, and sent a duplicate to a lawyer I trusted since college. Then I started writing a resignation letter. I didn't send it. Not yet. Wednesday morning, I received a blind copy of an email from one of our biggest partners. Subject: Withdrawal Contingency Body. We respectfully decline to move forward without direct oversight by Ethan Rhodes. His absence raises questions about project integrity. I stared at the screen for a long time. So, someone out there still knew my name. Before I could even process that, I was summoned again. This time, not by HR, by Daniel. I walked into his office. The blinds were down. The room felt too quiet. He didn't sit. He stood behind his desk, hands in his pockets. "You've made your point," he said. "Now it's time to move on." I said nothing. He stepped closer. "I'm giving you a clean exit, 1 month's pay, a glowing letter. But in return, you walk away and stay silent." There it was, the final offer. I looked him dead in the eyes. "Then I guess this is goodbye." The final click was oddly anticlimactic. I reread the 3 lines one last time before hitting send. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position. I appreciate the opportunities afforded to me. I wish the company continued success. No drama, no accusation, no closure. Attached to the email was a small USB, physically delivered to Daniel's assistant that same morning. No label, no note. Inside, a single file titled, "You'll need this soon." By the time he opened it, if he ever did, I'd already deactivated all personal credentials, wiped my laptop, and left my access card in a drawer. I walked out through the lobby at 10:13 a.m. No one noticed. The air outside felt foreign, quiet. I sat in my car for a full 10 minutes before driving home. Lily didn't ask anything. She simply met me at the door, arms around me. I held her tighter than I had in months. The next day, we took Emma to the woods. It was the first time in 3 years that I'd said yes to something that didn't involve spreadsheets or boardrooms. We hiked. We laughed. I watched her throw leaves into a stream and scream like it was magic. That night, as she slept beside a dying campfire, I whispered, "I'm sorry I missed this much." 3 days later, it started. First, a leaked statement from Nova Partners. They were pulling out of their long-term agreement with Whitmore Tech. Strategic misalignment was the official reason. Then came Kronos Capital. Then Viatic Group, all within a week. Over $30 million in contracts, gone. The board scrambled. Daniel locked down communications. Internal calls ramped up. Rumors spread like fire. People said nothing publicly, but everyone knew it was tied to me. Daniel must have gone through the USB by then. The file wasn't incriminating, not directly. It was a strategic analysis. A bullet point blueprint outlining vulnerabilities, reputational risks, and a scenario tree, labeled, "If ethical oversight is ignored." There were no accusations, only consequences, and consequences were unfolding. On Friday, Daniel received an anonymous email. No message, just an attachment, a 3-minute voice recording. In it, his own voice said, "I don't care what compliance says. Make the numbers look good. We'll deal with the rest later." It wasn't a confession, but it was enough. I never sent that file. But someone else had been listening. By Monday, the internal climate had shifted entirely. Senior engineers began handing in resignations. The head of PR walked, then legal. It was like the nervous system had been severed, one organ at a time. No explosions, just quiet departures. Daniel paced his office, barking orders, demanding control. He suspected I was behind it all, but there was nothing. No fingerprints, no trails, just a ripple, widening, unstoppable. I watched it all from the outside. I didn't gloat. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I accepted an invitation from a small startup I'd mentored years ago. They needed guidance, strategy, stability. And even though the company was young, messy, barely funded, it felt right. Everyone knew who was behind the scenes, of course. Industry whispers started calling it the Rhodes effect. Back at Whitmore, Daniel grew paranoid. He called in consultants, investigators, even PR crisis managers. Nothing stuck. That's when the real twist landed. An email from the Office of Corporate Ethics and Oversight. Subject: Inquiry initiated. It wasn't just about contracts or management disputes anymore. Someone had filed a formal complaint, detailed, timed, documented. And it wasn't me. Daniel, in desperation, called me. It was 2:27 a.m. My phone lit up with his name. I let it ring. Then again. The third time, I answered. Silence. Then his voice. Shaky. Unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. "Ethan, what are you doing?" I didn't speak. "You're tearing this place apart." Still, I said nothing. He exhaled, panicked. "You win, okay? I get it. You're smarter. You're better. Just stop." Finally, I spoke. Calm. Quiet. "I didn't do anything, Dan. I just left." And I hung up. It started with a blog post, not mine. A mid-level analyst from the finance department published an anonymous article on Medium titled "Behind Closed Doors: How the Culture of Fear at Whitmore Tech Dismantled Itself." No names, no specifics, just enough breadcrumbs to make any real journalist salivate. Within 48 hours, a tech-focused media outlet picked it up, then another, then the Wall Street Review. Suddenly, Daniel's empire wasn't just bleeding contracts. It was under the microscope. Sources came forward. Leaks sprung from corners no one expected. Email trails showing manipulation of contract terms. Performance numbers tweaked before board presentations. Legal memos warning of reputational exposure that had been deliberately buried. The company released a bland statement about prioritizing internal audits, but it only made things worse. I watched from home, coffee in hand. Emma curled up beside me watching cartoons. The second week into the storm, something strange happened. A batch of documents was released to the press. Files so cleanly structured and well organized, the journalists joked someone must have color-coded them. But they weren't a joke. At the bottom of each document, in the metadata, was one clear phrase, created by Ethan Rhodes. I hadn't sent them, not directly, but apparently someone had access to the copies I'd backed up years ago and decided to finish the job I never started. I froze when I saw it on the news. Not from fear, from the weight of implication. My name was now synonymous with exposure. That night, Lily looked at me across the dinner table. Her eyes were wide, unreadable. "Was it you?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I know who." And I did. On the third day of the media storm, I received an encrypted message from an old colleague, Leah Monroe, one of the project leads I'd worked with in my early years at Whitmore. She'd been one of the first to turn cold when things began to shift. Her silence had hurt, maybe more than Daniel's betrayal. Her message was short. I spoke to the press. I gave them everything. It was the least I could do. I'm sorry I didn't stand by you when it mattered. I stared at her name for a long time. If someone who once betrayed you came forward and admitted they're wrong, would you forgive them or stay silent? The media latched onto her testimony. She confirmed that I had been quietly pushed out, that my work had been passed off, that my name had been erased intentionally by executive order. It broke the dam. Suddenly, silence became guilt by association. People scrambled to distance themselves. Those who'd stayed quiet before were now volunteering interviews. Lawyers started whispering about liability. And then it happened. A special segment on evening news revealed that the Securities and Exchange Commission had launched a formal investigation into Whitmore Tech. And with it came the headline that dropped like a bomb. SEC orders temporary asset freeze pending inquiry into corporate ethics violations. Daniel's face appeared on screen, tight-lipped, grayer than I remembered. Whitmore's stock crashed 38% in 24 hours. Internally, operations froze. Payroll stalled. Partners filed withdrawal notices. Even the janitorial service announced termination. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. No interviews. No tweets. No statements. I wrote one sentence on my old dusty blog. Every system has the option to choose integrity. Nothing more. No names. No pride. Just truth. But somehow, it resonated. It was reposted thousands of times. "Bah, look," Emma shouted one afternoon, pointing at a tablet. "They drew you like a superhero." She held up a hand-drawn picture she'd made herself. Me, with a cape, standing on a pile of servers, holding a giant checkmark over my head. Written underneath in shaky crayon, "My dad is a truth hero." I laughed. Then I cried. Lily found me like that, shoulders shaking, Emma hugging my neck. She didn't say anything. She just kissed my forehead. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from a global tech firm I'd long admired but never worked with. They didn't ask for an interview. They just said, "We need someone to rebuild transparency from the ground up. Would you be willing?" I didn't answer right away. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building something that didn't need secrets to survive. 2 days later, another message came, this time from a secured address with no name. The subject line read, "You've proven what tech can't. Ready for something bigger than software?" Attached was nothing but coordinates and a timestamp. No explanation, no signature. But I felt it. Something was coming. And this time, I wasn't the one knocking at their door. They said building something new from ashes was impossible. I disagreed. 6 weeks after the Whitmore collapse, I co-founded a startup with 3 others, 2 engineers, 1 ethicist. We named it Clarity. No shareholders, no stock options, no private equity strings. Just transparency, code, and a mission. to prove that tech could be built without deception. Clarity wasn't designed to compete with giants. It was meant to be something else entirely. An open source, community-driven think tank, where systems were as ethical as they were efficient. Every decision, from design to deployment, was publicly logged. Mistakes weren't covered. They were corrected, together. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building, not defending. Then came the messages. Former colleagues, people who had once turned their backs on me. A few apologized outright. Others didn't. They just asked, "Can I join?" I met with them, one by one, not to interrogate, just to ask a single question. Why now? Some said they couldn't stand what they'd become. Others admitted they had followed orders out of fear. None tried to justify what happened. I let a few in, but not before making them sign something. Not an NDA, a pledge. That they would never again value growth over truth. That if ever faced with the choice between loyalty and integrity, they'd choose the latter, even if it meant walking away. Most of them signed without hesitation. One asked, "What if I mess up again?" I told him, "Then you'll tell us, and we'll fix it." Can one person change a system? Maybe. Maybe not. But they can start a fire in the right place. The kind that spreads differently. Not to destroy, but to illuminate. One morning, I received a letter. Real paper. White envelope. Presidential seal. Inside, an invitation. "Mr. Rhodes, your insights into digital ethics and system integrity have not gone unnoticed. We'd be honored to have you serve as an advisor in our national reform initiative on data transparency and AI accountability." No deadline. Just, "We believe you understand what others have only theorized." I placed the letter on my desk and stared at it. I wasn't chasing redemption anymore. But maybe I was ready to offer direction. 2 weeks later, I took the stage at the Global Ethics and Tech Summit. The room was filled with founders, legislators, developers, skeptics, and one face in the third row caught my eye. Daniel. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but diminished. His hands were folded in his lap. His eyes didn't leave mine. I took a breath. Years ago, I believed ethics were about rules, boundaries, what not to do. But I was wrong. Ethics aren't walls. They're maps. They don't just tell us what to avoid. They guide us toward who we want to become. I paused. In this industry, we talk about disruption like it's always a virtue. But the most powerful disruption I ever experienced wasn't technological. It was silence. From people I trusted. From myself. There was no slideshow, no product demo, just words, and one confession. I was never trying to destroy anything, not even when I walked away. The real weapon wasn't a file, or a leak, or a whistle. It was trust, community, the people who believed in doing better, and then actually did. That was my secret card. Not code, not leverage. Faith. Faith that truth, when protected, becomes contagious. As the applause rose, I saw Daniel lower his head, not in shame, in understanding. After the session, Emma ran onto the stage, arms open. Lily followed, laughing through tears. I knelt, scooped Emma up, and held them both. No titles, no headlines, just my family. They called me a truth hero. Emma whispered in my ear. "No," I said, "you're the reason I became one." The next day, I received an encrypted message from a group I'd only heard about in whispers. Global, deeply funded, morally ambiguous. They offered funding, resources, a seat at the helm of a new initiative. Ethical oversight of AI governance worldwide. The condition? Total control. No transparency, no checks, just me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was leverage, a symbol, a brand. I read the message twice, then I deleted it. I already knew my answer. I never replied to the proposal from the global consortium. No polite decline, no debate, just silence. They wanted control. I wanted connection. So I turned down a seat of power and instead accepted a quiet position as a visiting lecturer at a small liberal arts college tucked between two valleys, far from the conference rooms and shareholders. The first day I stepped into the classroom, 12 students looked up at me, wide-eyed, skeptical, curious. I asked them one question. Why does integrity matter more when no one's watching? We didn't talk about algorithms that day. We talked about people, how fear hides behind silence, how systems reflect those who build them, how sometimes doing the right thing won't make you a hero, but it'll let you sleep at night. Over time, I mentored a handful of students closely. One of them, a junior named Kai Nguyen, reminded me of myself, relentless, principled, and frustratingly idealistic. But unlike me at his age, Kai had language for what I hadn't understood until far too late. He once said, "Ethics isn't what you carry into the room, it's what you leave behind." He went on to launch an open data platform that exposed lobbying efforts tied to disinformation campaigns. 3 months later, he was on the cover of a major tech magazine. They called him the conscience of code. I smiled when I saw it. People asked if I was proud. I said, I'm just relieved. Do you think ethics can spread like wildfire? I do now. One crisp morning, as the first leaves began to fall, I received a message. No subject, no sender, just a single line. We need Ethan. Attached was a location, coordinates deep in a region I'd never set foot in. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I walked to class and asked my students, if someone called on you not to lead, but to repair, would you go? They didn't have an answer. And that's okay, because neither did I. Later that evening, I sat on the porch, watching Emma play with chalk on the driveway. Lily brought me coffee, and for a long while, we just sat in silence. Not because we had nothing to say, but because everything that mattered was already understood. I thought back to all the versions of me, the hopeful builder, the silent strategist, the ghost in the machine, the man who walked away. And now, this, not a hero, not a leader, just a reminder that sometimes survival isn't about winning. It's about staying unchanged. The following month, I gave a closing talk at a regional ethics summit, low profile, no cameras, just folding chairs and real conversations. A familiar face waited in the back row. Daniel. He wore a simple shirt, no title badge, no entourage. After the session, he approached slowly. His voice was low. I've started teaching, he said. I raised an eyebrow. About what? He smiled faintly. About what not to do. I didn't know whether to shake his hand or walk away, so I did neither. I just nodded. Because sometimes, growth isn't loud. It's admitting you failed where no one clapped. Clarity, my startup, lived on. Not as a unicorn, but as a sanctuary, a place for second chances, a proving ground for those who still believe that transparency could be scalable. We mentored, we built, we listened more than we spoke. One afternoon, Emma brought home an assignment. Draw someone who makes the world better. She drew a circle. Inside, 3 stick figures: a dad, a girl, and something that looked like a heart with feet. "What's that?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's honesty. You said we should always walk with it." That night, as she fell asleep beside me, I whispered, "I didn't fight for revenge. I just refused to accept wrong as normal. I wasn't a warrior. I was a witness to how systems crack, how silence spreads, and how sometimes, when enough people choose truth over comfort, something shifts. Not all at once, but deeply." And finally, as I closed her bedroom door, I thought of one last thing to write. One sentence that held every scar, every lesson, every lost night and hard choice. So I did. Ambition is not a crime. Losing your ethics is where collapse begins.